The Tennessee Titans offense struggled on day one of training camp practices, but Will Levis and company bounced back in a major way on Thursday. I'll break it all down on today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland. Titans fans, today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. The Tennessee Titans were back out on the practice field for day two of training camp practices. And while the offense struggled on Wednesday, we got a major bounce back on Thursday. I'll talk about Will Levis. I'll talk about who he was throwing to in the run game as well. Also, we have our first injury of training camp. Chido Awuzie was hurt. I'll break down all of the details there. And the Titans made their first roster moves of training camp. I'll tell you who's in and who's out. Before we get into all of that, I do want to thank you for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. You're not going to beat that anywhere else. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day here on the number one Tennessee Titans podcast in the world. Speaking of every day, shout out to my everydayers out there tuning in Monday through Friday. Couldn't do it without you guys. Titans training camp has begun. The season's right around the corner. If you aren't tuning in every day to get caught up on your Tennessee Titans news, well, then you need to. So with that being said, though, let's dive into Thursday's training camp practice for the Tennessee Titans. Again, a major bounce back from the Tennessee Titans offense. Will Levis was sharp, according to all reports coming out of camp. And we heard that from Brian Callahan. Tennessee Titans head coach echoed that as well. He said in his press conference that he has been very pleased with Will Levis and the Titans offense so far. Will Levis has been on time, incredibly confident. He also said that Will Levis is dialed in and ready for what's ahead. So major praise for Will Levis coming from head coach Brian Callahan. And you look at the numbers and it backs it up. So according to Jim Wyatt from TennesseeTitans.com, Will Levis was 7 for 8 in 7-on-7 work. He was 4 of 6 in 11-on-11. He is 11 for 14 on the day. And so far throughout the first 2 days of camp, he is 22 for 30. So an excellent start to training camp for Will Levis. And one thing to keep in mind here is in both the first days of training camp practices, the Titans have had a rule: nothing vertical. Nothing vertical. The Titans are working on short. They're working on intermediate. And that makes sense. Number one, from a training camp perspective, you don't want guys running down the field full speed too fast. You got to get them acclimated back to training camp before you start sending them out as fast as they can go. A little bit of a warm-up, of course. But also, we know that Will Levis has the ability to bomb the ball deep. We know that Will Levis can throw the deep ball. It's the short to intermediate stuff that Will Levis definitely needs to work on and get better at. And it sounds like that is the focus right now. So Will Levis looking sharp early in training camp. And Brian Callahan just looked, I gave you guys the words, but I have to find a way to convey the emotion and the body language. Callahan just looked so fired up talking about Will Levis. And when you look at the numbers and how well he's throwing the ball right now, that makes sense that Callahan would be that jazzed up. But Tyler Boyd looks like he has a good connection with Will Levis early on, according to reports. Looks like their timing is in the right place. Also, Chigakonkwo, according to Jim White, caught 2 passes over the middle in 7-on-7. Got some praise from the coaching staff. The connection between Chigakonkwo and Will Levis is something that I've seen multiple people discuss. Looks pretty good early on. And Chigakonkwo obviously had a slow start to the year, but once Will Levis came in, Chigakonkwo went right back to the player that he was in his rookie season. And it would make sense that they would continue that on and Chigakonkwo would be on that pace and be back to that first-year production level now that Will Levis is going to be the starter from day one, which he probably should have been all year. Last year, Mike Vrabel obviously wanted to bring him along slowly, didn't want to give him any public credit, really tried to slow play Levis, and that obviously was not the move. But love hearing that. Josh Wiley caught a pass as well. And yesterday, on yesterday's show, yesterday's practice, Tennessee Titans put out a video of Josh Wiley catching a good pass down the sideline. So that tight end connection is going to be key because, again, we know Will Levis can throw the deep ball. It's the short to intermediate stuff that we really need to see improvement, the accuracy, the pacing, the timing, and for him to have a good connection early on with Tyler Boyd, Chigakonkwo, Josh Wiley, that's absolutely huge. So hearing it from the coaching staff, seeing it in the numbers, all the reports, really excited about what Will Levis was able to do. But it wasn't just the passing game that was part of the offensive bounce back on Thursday. And it's funny, Brian Callahan even said, yesterday was disjointed, but they looked a lot better today, happy with the bounce back for the offense. He talked about that after practice. But the run game got some love on Thursday. Tajay Spears broke off a big run, according to reports. Tony Pollard was out there making moves. Julius Chestnut broke off a big run, according to reports as well. So if you think about the run game, of course, we're going to mention the running backs. But what that really means is the O-line. Yesterday, all we heard was people are slicing through the line untouched. So many pressures, tackles for loss, punching the ball out, this and that. But today seemed like a different story. Some love for J.C. Latham. I think I saw, I forget exactly who reported it. I think it might have been J.T. Runke, but he was saying J.C. Latham was going at it today. J.C. Latham was ready to go. And it makes sense. Look, these rookies, it's going to take them a little bit of time to acclimate and play their best version of themselves, including J.C. Latham, even as a first rounder. But hearing that he was fired up and playing well, that's a great sign after, obviously yesterday, the defense won the day. Okay. So love hearing that. There's some videos out there of Peter Skoronski and J.C. Latham working together on their combo blocks. And man, they just both look so big and strong. Pete did an interview after practice, and my God, man, he's just a totally different looking guy than last year. Last year, Peter Skoronski looked like a chubby kid. You know what I mean? In his face. And this year, he looks like a burly monster. And he mentioned that, he's gained weight. But it's obvious. It's obvious by looking at him. He is just so much bigger. Crazy. And also worth noting that we're hearing reports, and shout out to my guy F-Words, but Zach, but right now, John Ojukwu and Sadiq Charles still starting on the right side of the offensive line. Right now, they're running with the one. So when NPF gets back, that'll be the real test for me. But Jerron Christian, not in the first two teams. Leroy Watson is second team right tackle. So interesting information, and we'll keep that in the back of our minds as we move forward through training camp and then into the preseason. But overall, a very good day for the offense. Will Levis looking sharp out there, having everybody excited. Can't wait to see what he does the rest of training camp. But while I know that you're all excited to hear this information, unfortunately, we do have our first, I don't want to say major injury, but big injury news out of training camp. The Titans lost a starting cornerback. I'll tell you what it is, who it is, and how long they're supposed to be out. And we'll go over some other injury updates because the Titans had a man return to practice on Thursday as well. And we got roster moves. The Titans made their first roster moves of training camp. I'll break down what's going on and what it means. We'll do all that now. Before we do, though, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Look, passion, drive, patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home some huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit. Only available to U.S. customers. Titans fans, let's continue today's recap of day 2 of Tennessee Titans training camp practice. We talked about the offense striking back and bouncing back, led by Will Levis in the run game. Now I want to talk about some unfortunate injury news, because that is a part of being out on the field, being back to football. There are going to be guys that get injured, and sadly, it's not the best news. It's simply not. Now, it's not as major as, other injuries could be, but still not what you want to hear. Before I get into that, do want to thank you again for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day, Monday through Friday. Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. Again, it's the #1 Titans podcast in the world for multiple years running for a reason. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day. But the injured player is Chido Awuzie. Titans starting cornerback, free agent signing. He has a calf injury and is going to be out multiple weeks. So that was from Titans head coach Brian Callahan directly, which, let me say this real quick. And I think Paul Kaharski made a joke about it as well, because it's just so different. But Brian Callahan wasn't even asked about Chido leaving practice on Wednesday. He literally came out and said at the beginning of his press conference on Thursday, Chido hurt his calf. He's going to be out 2 to 3 weeks. Just came out and said it. You know what I mean? So I appreciate that transparency. Mike Vrabel would have never disclosed that information. He would have said, banged up, will be out a little bit. He never would have put a timeline on it, never would have told us what the injury is. So already, these are the type of things. And I saw somebody respond and say, what are you guys going to do now that you can't speculate about everything? You know what we're going to do? We're just going to talk about the realities. Like, Mike Vrabel wasn't helping anybody by hiding information from everyone. He was making it worse, because then people had to speculate, and then people talked about it more. Now we know. Chido Awuzie, calf injury, out a few weeks. Nothing to speculate. No crazy segments to chitter-chatter about. We just know. It actually kills the conversation to be transparent, not like hurt the player. Mike Vrabel always thought it would hurt the player to be transparent. In reality, you're hurting the player more by increasing the rampant speculation by not being transparent. So I know that's a little bit of a diatribe here when you guys came for the injury news, but man, as someone who covers the team, it's just such a breath of fresh air. And it's funny to see it actually go the opposite way of what Mike Vrabel thought it would do by just telling the truth. Telling the truth. It's not that big of a deal. So anyway, it sucks to see Chido out. But again, this is why I was so excited about the addition of Jarvis Brownlee Jr. at cornerback. Jarvis Brownlee Jr. could pop right out there and play. Like, I don't think, obviously, he's as good as Chido. He's not as good as L'Jarius Sneed, obviously. But he's still a good player. Like, I don't feel like last year when the top 3 corners were out, we were getting Eric Garrower or we were getting Trey Avery. I feel much better about having a guy like Jarvis Brownlee Jr. out there as the 4th cornerback. So, look, you hope that something like this doesn't carry on into the regular season. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it won't matter. A calf, we don't know what the injury is. It's a calf injury. I would imagine it's probably a calf strain. You know what I mean? But something like that can definitely go into the season. So it is unfortunate. I'm not going to sit here and try to hype you guys up and act like it's no big deal. It's not what you want to hear. But hopefully in a couple of weeks, Titans get into these preseason games. Chido can get back out there and get back in the rhythm with the team. But happy to have Jarvis Brownlee Jr. And again, Gabe Judy Lawley, the undrafted free agent out of Tennessee, on the last play of practice, he knocked a pass away from DeAndre Hopkins. And we've heard that throughout OTAs, and said that Gabe Judy Lawley was making plays. And this just reinforces the fact that I think he'll make the team. So if you have JBJ, and then you have GJL, and you have them as your depth cornerbacks, throw Eric Garror maybe in the 6th spot at cornerback. Like, that's a good place to be. So Chido out a couple of weeks. Nice to have the transparency from Brian Callahan. Hopefully it doesn't linger into the season, but as a guy who's had a ton of injury issues the last few years, it definitely does. There's definitely a level of worry that we all should reasonably have about Chido's status going forward. It's not season ending, obviously, but still, calf injury is something that can linger. And for a guy dealing with injuries the last few years, it's not what you want to hear. No way around that. Harold Landry was still out, but again, this is an illness. It's not, knee, arm. It's not some sort of soft tissue or he's sick. Okay. And I mean, we've all been sick before, right? So not worried about Harold Landry there. Daniel Brunskill back out on the field. Okay. So Daniel Brunskill has been running at backup center throughout the offseason. He continued to run as the backup center when he returned to practice on Thursday. Again, he's another guy like Harold Landry. He was dealing with an illness. He was sick. So back out on the field, everything good with Daniel Brunskill. But we're going to talk more about Daniel Brunskill when we go over some of these roster moves the Titans made, because the Titans did bring in a true backup center, and it's a name that you all will recognize. So we're going to talk about that at the end of the show. I do want to give a couple more injury updates, though, here. James Williams, Titans rookie, 7th-round linebacker out of Miami, was not out on the practice field on Thursday. So that's something to keep your eye on as well. It is a crowded linebacker room. We talked about that recently, the linebacker logjam. Okay, so I thought James Williams would have a good chance to make this team. He probably still, we don't know the extent of the injury or what it is or anything like we do with Chido, but when you're a rookie and you're already at a crowded position and you're transitioning from a different position in college to a new position in the NFL, you need all the reps you can in early training camp. So it definitely is disappointing news for James Williams, but we don't know the extent. He could be right back out there on Saturday. So that's something to watch for going forward. And then L'Jarius Sneed was out at practice, but didn't really participate, I guess is the right way to explain it. He wasn't involved in 7-on-7, wasn't involved in the team stuff. But Brian Callahan talked after practice about, and L'Jarius Sneed talked after practice actually about this, that you don't necessarily have to be out on the field to be a leader. Like, he can still help guys. He can still give encouragement from the sideline. And he talked about the fact, look, we all knew this. If anybody is panicking or being negative about L'Jarius Sneed, I don't know what you were expecting. We talked about this when he was signed. The Titans are going to manage him. The Chiefs managed him. He didn't participate in training camp at all last year for the Chiefs and played 100% of the snaps in the regular season and was one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL and then went to win a Super Bowl. So I'm just not going to trip about L'Jarius Sneed being managed. They have a management plan for him. So I'm not going to trip that they're following it. Like, this was the plan all along. So there's no reason to have any negative feelings there. But with that being said, the Titans did make some roster moves. Okay, we're seeing the churn. If you guys are in the business world, you know that that's a big term, talking about moving through your employees, how quickly you do that. I have certainly worked at a few businesses that have a very high churn rate, but the Titans were always going to churn their roster throughout training camp as they could, and they added 2 new players while waiving, whenever you use the technical term, waiving a player who, I got to admit, I thought was going to make the roster. So we're going to talk about that now. Before we do, though, speaking of getting jobs, losing jobs, got to tell you guys that today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. Look, when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're simply looking in the wrong place. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for their hiring. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats, and they might not have the time or the resources to hire. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's LinkedIn BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Titans fans, let's cap off today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. We talked about the offense striking back, led by Will Levis in the run game. We talked about some injury news in the first week of camp. Now I'm going to talk about these roster moves that the Titans have made. Before I get into it, though, I do want to thank you again for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first to listen each and every day. Also want to let you know that Locked On has launched the first ever 24/7 national sports streaming channel. It's on YouTube. It's also on Amazon Fire TV. It's called Locked On Sports Today. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day. You get local experts from Locked On, coverage of every league from our national shows. Quit turning on ESPN and Fox Sports 1 and all these debate shows. Get in some good quality sports content with Locked On Sports Today. 24/7. Just throw it on in the background and it's always there for you. But with that being said, the Titans made 3 roster moves. They signed Corey Levin, center, who has been with the Titans organization a ton over the last few years. They also brought in Shane Ray, who is a name that you may recognize. The Titans worked him out earlier in the offseason. He was a former first-round pick of the Denver Broncos, had an up-and-down career so far. We'll dive into all that. And they also waived running back Dillon Johnson. I thought Dillon Johnson was going to make the team as RB3. I thought he would be the primary running back, and then you would have Hassan Haskins as your backup, who's more of a special teams guy, but that is not going to be the case, obviously. So we're already 0 for 1, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, no one's going to go 100% on those predictions, but still, dang, took one day, and they're like, yeah, get out of here. Don't want to see you. Good for Jabari Small, though. The Tennessee Vol gives him a better chance to make it. They didn't replace Dillon Johnson with another running back, of course, as I just outlined. But I want to start with Corey Levin. So Corey Levin is a center. He's not a guard, not a tackle. He is a pure center only. And he's basically only played center throughout his career. Well, Daniel Brunskill has been the backup center for the Titans throughout the offseason. So the question becomes, is Corey Levin just additional depth? And remember, I said earlier that Daniel Brunskill was still the backup center at today's practice. So there's a ton of questions that go through my mind. Number one, do they want to move Daniel Brunskill back to guard? Maybe Sadiq Charles is struggling at guard. Maybe Dylan Radins isn't doing so hot. And they're like, man, we're going to need Brunskill back at guard. He's probably our best guard. So we're going to sign a backup center so that Brunskill can transition back from center to guard. That was my first thought. Interesting. But then you also wonder, maybe, and I've called Daniel Brunskill a cut candidate throughout the offseason, maybe the Titans are like, why would we pay Daniel Brunskill $3 million this year to be our backup center? We could bring in Corey Levin for a veteran minimum and then cut Daniel Brunskill and save $2 to $3 million. I've thought he was a cut candidate all along because Dylan Radins and Sadiq Charles could both be ahead of him. So again, I have talked about the fact that you could probably get backup center play for cheaper than what you're paying Daniel Brunskill. So maybe this is the beginning of, hey, now we've replaced you as backup center for cheaper. We're going to cut you to save that money, which opens up more room to bring in Quandre Diggs, bring in Justin Simmons, make a trade of some kind. Keep that into the regular season, of course, to make moves there. There are a ton of reasons why that could happen. So I thought that was interesting, but on its face right now, Corey Levin added as the third backup center, the backup center. So there you go. But the other addition is Shane Ray. And I talked about Shane Ray earlier this offseason when the Titans worked him out. He was a first-round pick of the Denver Broncos in 2015. Actually got that championship ring from that year, being a rookie. But his career is not going well. Okay, so He was with the Broncos, flunked out with the Broncos pretty quickly, hasn't played in an NFL game since 2018, spent some time in the Canadian Football League, was with the Buffalo Bills for a short stint during training camp last year, I believe. But again, hasn't played in an NFL game since 2018. Shane Ray is someone who is supremely talented coming out of college, but just has not been able to kind of get the off-field stuff together, the work ethic, the mental aspect of it. Remember, you could be the best athlete of all time, but if you aren't a hard worker, if you aren't somebody who's committed off the field, it's going to be a struggle for you, which honestly is part of my concerns about T'Vondre Sweat. It's the off-the-field commitment. You know what I mean? That can doom the most talented. Look at Jamarcus Russell. Jamarcus Russell is one of the most talented college football players we've ever seen, but he just was not committed to being a professional football player off the field. And you have to put those two together to make it work at a level this high. Okay. So Brian Callahan said that, they brought him in to be part of that rotation. Look, I don't think that Shane Ray is going to make this team. I don't think he's going to have some career resurgence, renaissance type deal and be a factor for the Titans. I think he is truly just a camp body who the Titans can get a look at. I wouldn't expect much more than that. So I still don't think that he's somebody who makes this team, but they do need depth at outside linebacker. And with Harold Landry being sick, they definitely need another player in there. You know what I mean? So with that being said, though, we got to move to the corresponding move to make a roster spot. And the Titans waived Dillon Johnson. Undrafted free agent running back, Mississippi State, went to Washington for his final year. Bigger power back. I just didn't see Dillon Johnson as a special teams guy, and that might have been what doomed him. They might have said, hey, he's an okay running back, but he's not going to give us anything on special teams. So what are we doing? You know what I mean? Like, that's just, I thought that maybe the Titans would want their third running back to be more of a talented runner. And then their fourth running back could be Hassan Haskins, who is more of the special teams ace. And that would make sense. But the Titans could be looking at it differently and saying, no, we need both of those backup running backs to be very good special teams players. And I just don't think that Dillon Johnson is going to fill that role. Now, you just have Pollard and Spears. Obviously, they're locked in. But then you got the two veterans in Chestnut and Hassan Haskins. We've heard good things about Chestnut so far. He is a more talented runner than Hassan Haskins is. But Hassan Haskins, I believe it was Teron Davenport who reported that Hassan Haskins layered a couple of moves together, had a nice run on Thursday. If Haskins is coming out with a vengeance and is going to be more valuable in the run game, then great. Look, Haskins is a good pass protector. He can catch the ball out of the backfield, and he's excellent on special teams. So I think Haskins is certainly in a great spot to make this team. At this point, it comes down to Jabari Small or Julius Chestnut. And Chestnut, obviously, is a veteran guy and probably has the edge at this time. But I thought it was interesting that they were like, we don't even need a fifth running back or a sixth running back. We're just going to drop down to these core five guys and figure out who gets those final two spots. So Dillon Johnson, it was a good time, not a long time. And one day, man, one day. But I think he'll get picked up somewhere else. There's a lot of people who like Dillon Johnson. So I think he'll find a way. But that is the offense striking back. That is the injury news from Thursday. That is the roster news from Thursday. You are a much more educated Tennessee Titans fan after listening to today's show, and that's going to continue throughout the entire season. So make sure that you get subscribed. You stay subscribed to the #1 Tennessee Titans podcast in the universe. Now, the Titans are going to be back out on the practice field for an open practice to the public on Saturday morning. I'm going to be breaking that down on Sunday for you guys, and then that'll lead us straight into week 2, Tennessee Titans training camp. But with that being said, that's going to do it for me today, folks. As always, I am your host, Tyler Rowland, and this was Locked On Titans.